Here's why I love chocolate so much. You see, in this country, a person is assumed to be white unless otherwise specified. That's why I like chocolate. Because when you first think of chocolate, you think of something brown. And if you think of white chocolate first, well, then you're a racist. My favorite band growing up was Weezer. I love that band. I love that band despite 2, 3, 4 crappy records in a row. I forgave that band because they were my childhood. I went to a Weezer concert a couple of years ago, excited to hear the old hits. I get there, the usher comes up to me and he says, "Sir, the parents section's upstairs." Parents section? Nah. I came to rock. You take me to the pit. Now, a mosh pit at a Weezer concert is different than other mosh pits, right? A mosh pit at a Weezer concert is basically nerds bumping into each other and apologizing. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ruin Only in Dreams for you. Yes, I lost my virginity to that song as well. Which is a lie. They're both virgins. So I go down to the pit, I'm excited to be there, and when I get there, I realize everyone's staring at me. Why? Because they're all 14 years old. Somehow Weezer's demographic has not changed in 15 years. They're still 14 to 17-year-olds. They're all staring at me as if I'm the creepy old dude. The creepy old dude at a Weezer concert at 27. Felt terrible, and then I started thinking about it. You know what? I'm not the creepy old dude in this situation. Weezer are the creepy old dudes in this situation. They're 40-year-old men who are making music that somehow teenagers can relate to. Isn't that a bit strange? Life is hard. Girls don't like me. High school's weird. Of course it's weird. You're 40. What are you talking about? Don't you hate when you have an amazing show and you can't wait to hang out with that 16-year-old girl you're in love with and she's all like, "Aren't you my dad's friend?" And that's Weezer. Let's be honest, audience. The end of that joke, it was disappointing. It's not... You laugh because you were told to, but like, it's not a... The end of that joke wasn't particularly good. I realized that. Like, you know, it started out kind of funny. It had a couple of nice big punchlines in the beginning of the joke, and then it plateaued for a while, really building off the momentum from the early part of the joke. And then the end, like, was really disappointing. And you may wonder why I did that. I'll tell you why. I wanted to write a joke that echoed the trajectory of Weezer's career. I was on a plane recently. I was reading the in-flight magazine. The in-flight magazine for that particular trip was an environmental issue. Yeah. I was reading about the environment while sitting on a pollution machine that can fly. So I'm clearly cynical, but I'm bored, so I'm reading the first article. The first article is called Top 10 Endangered Places. Here's the first sentence. Climate change and tourism are threatening to destroy these natural wonders. Okay, I'm kind of surprised here. Clearly, tourism is in the best interest of the airline industry. Yeah, way to go, man. There's some responsibility, airline. But then I read the rest of the sentence. Climate change and tourism are threatening to destroy these natural wonders, so you might want to plan a trip now before these sites are gone for good. We're screwed. We're screwed because some corporations are treating the planet like we're in second semester senior year. It's almost over. It. Let's get to the pressing issues of the day, okay? The more important issues of the day. Vegan soul food. What the Really? Really, vegans? You dare bring that into the earth? Really? Vegan? That doesn't even make any sense. Let's think about this for a moment, okay? And what's the history of soul food?
Slaves were given the worst parts of the animals, pig's feet, things like that. They had to cover it in lard and spices, whatever they could to make that taste delicious. Soul food is steeped in African American history and tradition. Then you have vegan food. Now, vegans also start with a limited number of ingredients, but arguably what they end up with tastes worse than what they started with. Now, that's arguable. That's arguable. I argue it because it's true. Some would argue otherwise, and they're wrong. Because I have had vegan Thanksgiving of tofurkey and soy gravy. And it's not to say that Thanksgiving will ever justify the genocide of the Native Americans, but vegan Thanksgiving, that's just spitting on the graves, isn't it? Thank you. Now, again, the bigger point here is vegans don't use animal products in their food, and that's a key part of soul food. That is an essential part of soul food, animal products. Therefore, vegan soul food is essentially a heavy metal cover album of Motown classics. Heavy metal is rock music stripped of its historic black elements. It can't properly cover Motown. If I saw a heavy metal cover album of Motown classics, I would not buy it. Unless, of course, the record was called Vegan Soul Food. At which point, it is high concept. And Daddy must have it. Daddy must have it.
I mean, Hindus aren't supposed to convert, but if we were, at least we'd have some options, you know? At least we know how to sell God, you know? Hey, man, let me ask you a question. You like elephants? I got elephant guy right here. Elephant guy Ganesh, I got elephant guy. Can get you through hard times, man. I'll get you through hard... No, not for you. That's cool. Elephants are scary for some people. I get it. You like monkeys? I got monkey guy. I got monkey guy. Monkey Hanuman. Has a tail. He can fly. No? All right, maybe. All right, you like the color blue? Oh, good. All right. 3 for 1. Vishnu, Rama, Krishna. That's 3 for 1. 3 for what? No? All right. Okay, that's fine. You like warranties? You like lifetime warranties. Reincarnation, that's infinite lifetimes warranty. No? How about some weed? Haha, weed wins again. I live in Brooklyn, New York, and I want to share a story with you. This is the weirdest thing I've ever dealt with in one of my walks in Brooklyn. I was walking around my neighborhood, and I saw a black woman pushing a stroller with a white baby in it. And that's not all that surprising, right? Especially in certain parts of New York. It's fair to assume that that's the nanny and that's the child she's taking care of. Now, it's possible that that child is that woman's partner's child from a previous relationship. That's certainly possible, right? Another possibility, genetics are very complicated. Maybe that was her child. The child is much lighter, you know, but the child had blonde hair and blue eyes. I didn't think so. But look, genetics is complicated. Maybe that was her child, right? Now, there's a third possibility, which is the least likely possibility, but that's the possibility I really want it to be. And that possibility is that this is a rich black woman who just bought herself the ultimate luxury item. Now, I'm trying to walk by these two people on the street when I overhear what this black woman is saying to this white child. And this is what she's saying. Toby, your name is Toby. Can you say it? That's your name. Your name is Toby. Say it. Your name is Toby. That's about 30 of you. About 30 of you understood. And you should be proud. For the rest of you, I will explain. There is a book/miniseries by Alex Haley called Roots. And in Roots, a slave, Kunta Kinte, is brought to America and is told his name is Toby. And he refuses to be called Toby, so he's whipped repeatedly. Your name is Toby, Kunta Kinte, whip. Toby, Kunta Kinte, whip. And it's absolutely horrific. Flash forward to a year ago in my neighborhood in Brooklyn. I saw a black woman tell a white child that his name was Toby. And there was no one else there to witness this. It was just me. I'm like this the whole time. Oh my God, this is amazing. Wow, wow. Wow, I have been in a writing slump. This is perfect right now. Now there's two possibilities how this could have happened, right? One possibility is that this black woman has also not seen or read Roots, has no idea why this is magical. Or the second possibility, this black woman just found a revenge for slavery.
My name is Hari. It's mispronounced a few different ways in this country. Hari, Harry, multiple ways to screw it up. What frustrates me more at this point is when the computer screws it up. I'll type something into Microsoft Word, I go for the spell check, and oh snap, my name is somehow spelled wrong. How is this possible, audience? Well, apparently, Hari is spelled H-A-I-R, hair. What kind of name is hair? My parents weren't hippies, that doesn't make any sense. Over 1 billion Indian people in the world, I'm sure at least 5 million Haris, I'm sure at least half of them work for Microsoft. So that mistake is unacceptable. I was hanging out with my younger brother recently, and we got into a conversation about how great an older brother I am. I brought up the topic. And he was being sarcastic because he had remembered a game that I had invented when I was 6 and he was 4 called the belt game. You see, I found my dad's belt and invented a game where the rules were you had to hit each other with the belt. And that's as far as I'd gotten at that point. Now I'm the older brother, right? So I got to go first. So I took the belt and I whipped him in the eye. And he started screaming and crying like a 4-year-old. And then my mom walked in, and to my surprise, she also knew how to play the belt game. I was like, Mom, how do you know how to play the belt game? I just made it up. I mean, apparently she was an old pro. Because she would take the belt and she would hit me across the back with it. And she said, now you know how your brother feels. And I looked back at her and I said, no, I don't. I hit him in the eye. That was the end of belt game. And a much needed return to Nerf.